hi to new friends who have joined us today. And I'm sure you guys have settled into the new normal, as they say. And there are a lot of webinars and a lot of online sessions that are happening. And I was attending one very recently, and a very famous author, Shiv Khera, he was saying that during the lockdown, you have to either come out healthy or upskilled or reskilled or with more knowledge. So I hope you are following these lectures and increasing your knowledge. And today I am here to share my knowledge that I have around the resumes, right? I understand that there are a lot of lectures where the speakers are just sharing their views, but I strongly believe that all of us have different ways of learning. Some learn by listening and some learn by seeing. So we are audio visual kind of learners. Some are kinesthetic, some actually do things and learn. But unfortunately, on this platform, on this medium, there's only one way, which is audio and visual. So I have put together a little presentation just like last time, and I hope that will be helpful to you. So let me quickly jump to the presentation and show you what exactly I have. Okay. All right. Okay. Why you should write your own resume. Actually, this title, I should give the credit to one of the recruiter I have in my organization. Before coming here, I thought maybe it's good idea for me to get some information validated with her. And she said, students should write their own resume. And then I thought, why not put the same topic? So credit goes to her. So I'm sure you must be thinking like, okay, why don't we start with a little view or overview about my profile, right? So I have put together something for you. So I'm a Hyderabadi, and there is a LinkedIn link of my profile. And I have close to 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. I worked in different business environments, a couple of cities in India and also in some European countries. In terms of education, I am a commerce graduate, and 17 years after my graduation, I suddenly realized that I didn't do my master's. And I thought, let's go for master's, and I enrolled in a subject which I am very much interested in. So, just like some of you on the call, I am also a student. In terms of the organizations that I have worked for, I have listed these great companies that I was fortunate enough in working. And I have also mentioned the last designation I held at that organization and the number of years I spent with these companies. And at a very broader level, some of the competencies that I have, as you can see, I have given myself a bigger bar on capability management, but a very small on the HR side. And when you saw my title on this topic, you saw Director HR. But let me tell you, I recently moved into HR. Earlier to this role, I was in cloud computing. Okay, so that's a little brief. And this is a disclaimer that I always put. These are my personal views. I am not representing NPTEL or my organization, Capgemini. And if I sit down and think about potentially how many interviews I have done or the resumes that I have screened, I think it will cross the 1,000 mark. So whatever I am going to share with you in this lecture today is all out of my personal experience. All right. So I don't know how many of you actually paid attention to the letter E in this word resume, and there are two extra things on both E's. These are actually called accents. So resume is actually a French word. So I don't know how many of you actually learned French in school. Pardon me if I'm not pronouncing it well because I did not study French. So these are called accents. So the meaning of resume is summary or sum it up. But few people also refer it as biodata, or some say curriculum vitae, or in short, CV. I understand it might be a little difficult for you to start looking where exactly can I go and type in order to get that E and then extra accent on top of it. Don't worry. because in the industry, everybody understands, even if you write simple resume, it's absolutely fine. So with that little perspective, let me tell you the flow that we are going to use on this lecture. And I have kept it pretty simple this time. I am just going to tell you what might go against each letter in the word resume. Okay, but before we actually jump into that, let me share some basics, because I feel if you understand the basics first, it will be easy for you to relate what I'm going to talk about in subsequent slides. So the first thing is there has to be a job requirement. Now, this job requirement can be because somebody who was doing that job has left the organization and the organization needs to backfill that position, or there is a new requirement that has come up, a new project because of which the company needs people to work on that, or the company is doing proactive hiring of looking at freshers from colleges. So throughout the lecture, I might be using more examples from an experience point of view, but wherever possible, I'll try and reflect on how freshers can relate to what is being discussed. Okay. Then comes the job description. Based on what is the job requirement, somebody will draft a job description. In corporate world, in short, it is referred as JD as well. Now, let me tell you that the person who writes the job description might be different than the person who will actually take your interview, or for that matter, the person who will do the initial screening of your profile. And the person who you will end up working with might be completely different. So the common thing between all these people is that job description. So when we talk more about certain things in the lecture, you will understand how much focus you need to pay on this job description alone. Then comes the sourcing bit. So when you think about HR team, maybe you always think about that recruiter that you interact with. But HR has a lot of functions. So within the recruitment team, there is a separate team called the sourcing team. And their main responsibility is to ensure that whatever the job description they get, they will float it in the market. They can do it either in a newspaper, they can do it on their company website, they can post it on LinkedIn, or they can give it to consultancies, or they can go to colleges. Now, you might be thinking that when somebody comes to college, will they have a job description? Because we don't get to see one, right? But even if there is no job description, there will be certain criteria that they are looking for, right? So against a requirement, there is a position that gets filled. You just have to remember that. Then comes the screening part. Let's say they have rolled it out and now they started receiving the resumes. And I will tell you a particular slide I have created which will focus only on the screening part. I will not give you more details at this point in time. Then comes the profile evaluation. So let's say they get a lot of profiles and then they'll shortlist, and based on what the actual requirement is, they will send it to the guy who has actually raised that requirement, saying that, okay, there are a couple of roles, we have received these many resumes, now we feel these are matching to that, now take it ahead. Once they look at those resumes, that is when they'll start calling people for interview. And if you do well in interview, that is when your selection happens. And now those of you who remember from the first session, the mask, so that selection happens basically because of the motivation you have to join the organization or pick up that role, your overall attitude, the skills that you have, and the knowledge that you possess. Yeah. So these are some of the basics that you need to keep in your mind every time you apply for any position. And as I said, we will look at what each letter of resume talks about. The first R is relevant information. Now, what I mean by relevant information is for one job opening or a requirement, the recruiter gets heaps of resumes, so many resumes, you can't even imagine. If you go on LinkedIn, just try. If you find some suitable job, apply, and sometimes LinkedIn will tell you how many people have applied for that position. So you can imagine if there are two positions and there are 2000 resumes, it becomes extremely difficult for the recruiter to look at all 2000 resumes. And I'll tell you what are some of the systems that have been put in place to filter them out. But let's just talk about, if you have to write your resume, what are some of the relevant information that you have to put in. So the first is your personal details. And when I say personal details, it is extremely important that you're very careful, because when we look at some resumes, we feel that the candidate has not paid attention to these personal details. And give you examples of it. The first one here is name as on certificate. And I am a classic example of this, because when I first joined General Electric, that was my first multinational organization. And I just went ahead and wrote my initials, because my name has three names in it. And the relieving letter, the pay slips, and everything that I have from that organization has my initials. Whereas my passport says something else, my birth certificate says something else, my degree certificate says something else. So please put in the name as you want the documents to be from that company. The second is contactable phone number. Here I'm not saying just a phone number, a contactable one. And I'll tell you, one of my friend reached out to me and said, hey, there is an opening in your company. Would you please refer me? I said, why not? I referred him, and the recruiter called me and said, okay, the profile seems to match. Can we talk to him? I said, why not? And he just missed one digit in his telephone number, and they could not reach, and they had organized a client interview, and client waited. They could not patch the call, and he just lost the opportunity. That is one. Second, when recruiters try and reach out to you on the number that you mentioned, just in case if you miss that call, there is very highly unlikely that you will be able to reach out the company, because the recruiter will use the main line to call you from an extension, and you will not know which extension the recruiter is calling you from. So even when you try and call the recruiter back, you will not be able to get hold of him or her. And most of the recruiters don't call from their mobile phones, because a lot of candidates will start calling, following up, and they don't have so much of time. So please be very careful on the telephone number that you put in. Correct email ID. Now this is another important piece. In a hurry, we might type, and I'll give you another example. So from my first lecture, there were a lot of questions that I could not answer on the session. So I took some time, read them, and tried to respond to them whenever I got time. And I realized sometimes people missed out on the @ symbol. Because if you look at your keyboard, you have to press shift and then the digit 2 to get that @ symbol. And let's say you didn't press the shift properly, and instead of the @ the 2 digit came up, the recruiter doesn't have the time to go and correct and then send you an email. So be very careful when you write your email address. City of residence is also very important, because most often when you look at the job requirement, it lists the city in which that job is, right? So please be careful when you write the city. Then comes the objective or synopsis. Now for freshers, because you don't have any experience yet, you can write an objective. Objective is nothing but your motivation, why you want to pick that role or why you want to join that organization. But for people with experience, they can write a synopsis or a profile summary. And if I just take you back, this is what I'm talking about. The profile summary in a very 1 or 2 liners I have mentioned, right? Then comes your education. Please mention the name of the college that you have gone to, and also the city, because there are possibilities that the same college has branches in different cities. One might be in Hyderabad, one in Guntur, right? So please be careful and write the city as well. Year of passing is very important, and also the percentage of marks or CGPA score. Now, I know you might be thinking that why is it that only freshers have to do it? Why not experienced people? Then, my dear friends, the experience have gained experience, and they can demonstrate that in their resume or when they talk. But for a fresher, it is your score that tells the interviewer the hard work that you have put in while you were in college. And for experienced people, it is the organizations that they have worked with. Again, the name of the organization, the location where this organization is, because organizations also have branches across the country and also across the world. the start and end date of employment, you don't have to necessarily mention exact date. If you see what I have mentioned, I've just mentioned the month and the year when I was with that organization. Then the job title or the designation. Now here also, let me just reflect that and take an example. Let's say there is a manager. Now manager can be a designation, and the companies have various ways of addressing this manager. They can give a particular number, or they can grade that person and say manager 1 or manager 8. They can go on with different gradings, but the actual role that manager is doing is of a project manager. So that becomes the role or the job title. So in my opinion, go ahead and write both your designation as well as the job title you had. Then comes the responsibilities. Now, you don't have to list down a big story of responsibilities. Mention what is relevant, and the guidance that we receive is it should be minimum of 3 bullets as your responsibility, if not long. Then the projects that you have worked on, and also some of the achievements. And I'll show you an example in subsequent slides, and you will get more clarity around that. Then comes the skills. Now, there are primary skills and secondary skills. So if I take an example of HR, let's say the primary skill can be talent management. The secondary skill can be learning and development, right? And then core competencies. What I have mentioned here, something like this, you can also mention. And the last is some training and certifications. A lot of students are doing courses on Coursera, right? And if you feel that is relevant, then you can go ahead and add it on your resume. And if there are any certifications that you have done outside, you can mention that as well. But be very careful on ensuring that is relevant to the job that you're applying for. Because if a student has done some course on calligraphy, calligraphy is that very nice writing that you do, but they are applying for a technical role, then there is no relation to what they have done and what is the requirement. Yeah. And I always add a tip after the slide. So my tip for relevant information is the exam philosophy of more number of pages and more marks doesn't work in resume. And I see there are a lot of questions that are coming from students before this session. I was just glancing through, and a lot of you have asked, okay, how many pages should a resume be? Is 1 page enough or what? So the best practice or what is expected is 2 pages is more than enough. Sometimes there are 1 pages as well, but I would say 2 pages is a okay number to have for your resume. Okay, let's move on. The E is for easy to read. What I mean by that is, now here are 2 pictures. Both are mine. On the left hand side, you see me standing in a lawn, and on the right hand side, my face is absolutely visible. So this is more or less like a passport size picture, right? So please, please, please put a picture which is very clear, because these days interviews happen on Skype through a virtual mode, and the interviewer would like to match the photo that they see on the resume versus the person that they are talking to. And the font. Now the left side looks pretty jazzy, fancy, fine, but there is a problem with that. The first letter of my name is S, and in this spelling it looks like G. It changes the complete meaning of my name, and all of us love our name. We don't want it to get spoiled. So be careful with the font and also the size of the font. Here, if you see, there are spelling mistakes on the left hand side. The bachelor and the commerce, there are a couple of letters missing. It is a typo. Now, it might be a very small thing, but let me tell you, the interviewers just get put off when they see spelling mistakes. And you work on Microsoft Word, and Word gives you, if there is a spelling mistake, there is a red line that comes underneath. Right click and then it will tell you the exact correct spelling of that. Please pay attention to that. And on the third point, I have highlighted on the right hand side the number of people that I have managed. On the left hand side, I just left it. So the moment you see something underlined, then you actually go and look at what exactly is mentioned. On the left hand side, I have given my experience. As you see, 2001 I started, then I jumped to 2010, and then 2008, and then 2006. Whereas on the right hand side, I have given the latest first and then went in a order. So always remember, when the recruiter looks at your resume, the eye scans downwards. Nobody goes to the last page and then come to the first page. The tip here is, have someone proofread your resume, please. Because no matter, you might be absolutely fine in terms of having an eye for detail, but sometimes we might miss it. And I'll give you an example of just last week that has happened. One of my friend owns a company, and in this COVID situation, they were trying to do some new things, and his associate sent me an email as an advertisement that this is what they are doing. And instead of mentioning coronavirus, he said coronavirus. So you can imagine, that is a business email that is coming in, and a typo like that was just overlooked. So please have someone else in your family or friends read the resume. And I would say for you to also read it multiple times before you go and sit in that interview, because the interviewer is going to ask you questions from the same resume. And if you have mentioned something and you are unable to answer, then it's a sorry picture. All right. The S is the specific details. Now, I understand you might have a lot to mention in your resume, especially for if you have some amount of experience, but please mention only the specifics. And I'll try and help you with an example here. So what organizations are trying to look at is, what has been your contribution versus the description. What I mean by that is, the job description already has what the job demands. If you simply copy and paste it in your resume, you are only describing what is already there. But what companies wants to know it is, against that description, what have you contributed? Now, maybe for experienced people, it becomes a lot more easier to correlate, but for freshers, you might be thinking like, how can I? So let me give you an example. I have taken an example of a college fest where, let's say, your authorities have asked you to move the venue. Probably you were trying to do your college fest in a big cafeteria you have, but now they ask you to move it to the ground, the playground. And here we have two candidates, candidate A and candidate B. Now let's see how the candidate A has written his or her experience on this particular example. The candidate A says, took part in the activities to change the venue, worked well with all groups involved in the move, ensured the move was successful. Now, some people might be like, oh, wonderful. They took part, they worked with others, and then it was successful. Let's see how the candidate B has written. Now, there is a lot of text there. I don't want you to start reading all of it, but let me help you identify some of the specifics that I'm talking about. Voluntarily. Now, the moment somebody writes this, and again, you have to write things which are true. Don't cook up stories, okay? So, if let's say the candidate B has really volunteered, that goes to show the initiative the person takes in his or her life. 24 hours. Now, that shows the recruiter in a very subtle way that you can work in tight deadlines. Arrived early and worked with logistics and admin, which means that you show that boundaryless behavior. And you can work with other teams. There is teamwork, then there is team spirit within you. Then you're also giving a specific that you just didn't move from, but whatever material was there in the previous venue, you moved it to the new venue. Then you're talking about that you allocated the task to the fellow student based on their interest. Like somebody might be willing to do something and somebody else, all of us have different motivations. So this shows that you have the people skills as well. And lastly, you are saying that you supervised. So this is a demonstrable behavior that you are documenting. So just imagine, if I am a recruiter and I get a profile of candidate A and candidate B, who do you think I'll go for? It's a no-brainer. Obviously, I'll go with candidate B. So the tip is, your resume is a medium for advertising yourself. Obviously, because as I said, there might be a handful of jobs, but so many people who are applying for it. And you can recall some wonderful advertisements which catches your attention. right? So treat your resume like a medium where you are advertising your skill set, your abilities, your contribution, and your fitment to that requirement. All right, so we saw relevant information, easy to read, specific details. Now the U is use keywords. Now what I mean by that is there is something called ATS. Now this is not that anti-terrorism squad that you hear in Bollywood action movies, but it is application tracking system, which is nothing but a software or a bot which works on some algorithms. Now, especially the larger firms, big corporations are using this, and the recruitment teams use this. So if you look at the picture, probably it's not a very good representation that people are being fed into the funnel and then it processes and then it tells you which one is the right one and all. I don't like this picture, but that is how the software works. Now, let me tell you what are some of the things. It gives a match rate. And I will give you an example to help you what exactly I mean by match rate. Then it gives a hit ratio. And at the end, it gives a ranking. Now, again, you might be saying that, oh my God, enough of ranking in colleges, in corporate world as well. So yeah, unfortunately, everywhere you will be ranked. So what I mean by match rate is, let's say the job description. What I mean is this part of the basics, the screening. So we are at the screening stuff now where the bot is trying to do things. So the job description says that somebody needs to have a MBA. But if you have mentioned Master of Business Administration, the bot cannot read the whole. It just starts to look at where the MBA is in the resume. So a smarter way is expand it and in brackets write what that is, so that you are feeding the bot or the ATS system with what it needs. Okay, that's one of the smarter ways. Hit ratio is how many candidates did we select from a particular college or the company in the past. Now, I understand you might say that that's unfair because I come from a college, unfortunately, and not a lot of campus hiring happens. But I'm just telling you that this is one of the metric that is used. And in some cases, it is used for an experienced person, so the freshers don't have to worry about it. Besides this, there might be a lot of other parameters which the companies will use. Ranking, again, as I said, based on these matching and then certain hit ratios, a certain threshold is given, and if the profiles of the candidates are within that threshold. So let's say we receive 200 profiles, out of which only 20 profiles match 70% to what the job description says. Then these 20 people will be ranked in order of how many keywords were matched with the resume, right? So content and format is the key. So please pay attention, and I will show you in the probably last but one slide as to what you need to avoid when you write in your resume. M is match the requirement. So you have been hearing that, okay, job description is your first thing and everything that you do needs to match. But what exactly do we have to match, or what are some of the things that we have to match? Okay, so here I'm talking about this job description part. Let's see. So you have your resume and you have a job description. So there is a balance that you need to create. So the first one is the job title. As I said, if you have played a role of a project manager and you just mentioned manager in your resume, then chances are it will not match. So when you see the job description and it says project manager, and if you have project manager experience, please mention project manager so that you get a tick. Second is the duties or the responsibilities or the expectations of that particular role. Read it properly and then see what are some of the keywords that are coming out of that duties. And then when you write your resume, you have to ensure that maximum keywords are matched according to that. Important thing is results. Now, if you remember, I said contribution is something which is very important. So every company, when they put up a job description, they'll also mention what are the benefits out of this role for the organization, right? So please pay attention to that. And when you write your achievements, if you have experience, then those achievement needs to match to the results that are mentioned in the job description. Then the education. Now, there are certain roles where education is very important. Like, for instance, if you are applying for a technical role, then engineering is a bare minimum. And if you want to apply for an HR role, then MBA in HR for freshers, especially. For experienced people, they can move like how I have moved into HR. But most of the time, they expect some amount of education. Then comes the skills. Most often, the hard skills are mentioned in the job description. Some companies might decide to put in soft skills, but mostly 98% of the time, it is always the hard skills. And last, the location. Now, location is very important because while there are some roles where they say that, okay, pan India, you can work anywhere, we don't mind. But there are some roles where the client expectation is you need to be working with the rest of the team in that particular location. And if your home city is the same as the city in which this role is, it becomes a lot more easier. If not, the company has to pay you for your relocation, unless if you are that niche player, you are the only one who has that experience, then company won't mind. But if it is a generic role and supply is a lot in the market, then they might prefer somebody who's in that particular location where the job requirement is. Tip here, and a very important tip, is different resumes for different positions. You cannot be having the same set of resume and you can't take it to all the interviews that you go to. And this is very serious. And I want to inform you that there are a lot of companies out there who take some money and create your resume. But I don't think so you can create a resume every time you apply for a new job, right? So maybe you can look at some of the formats. You go to Google, just type resume formats, it will give you a lot. And if you practice a little on Microsoft Word, you will be able to create a resume just like how you see that. So I don't think so, especially for freshers, students, I don't think so you need to spend money in giving it to a agency and they create your resume, because you have to create a resume every time you apply for a new job. You have to look at all these things that are there on this slide and match it according to that. And it is a very serious job. Let me tell you, resume is not something that you spend half an hour and done with it. It is more or less like a full-time job. Maybe a week you will take to ensure that you have a perfect resume. And believe me, when you write your own resume, the kind of satisfaction that you get is immense. All right, so the last one is evaluable. Now, again, this ties back to our application tracking system, because as you know that it is not a human most of the time behind the screening, it is a bot, it's a machine. Now, if you pay attention to what I have listed here, there is a slight change I did. Now, let me take you back to my original profile summary that I was trying to show you. I have listed the names of the companies that I have worked for. But in order to make it a little more visual, here I have added the logos of the company. So from a visually, this looks a lot appealing than that one. But unfortunately, what if the application tracking system has not been pre-fed with the logos of the company? You will lose out on an opportunity. So in my opinion, there might be some bots which have come up now which can read, because artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all that might have improved. But what if the company has not invested in the upgradation of their bot or ATS? So in order to avoid that, don't have the logos, but please mention the character and the name of the organization. Second is on the format. Now, Word is something that you will start, but I would strongly urge you to save it as a PDF, because the version of Word that you might be using may be different than the version that the interview will open it. And chances are that the format and the positioning will just go haywire here and there. And if it is not appealing, they'll just cross it and not even look at the resume. But whereas when you save it in a PDF, then it becomes a lot more easier. And the naming as well. If you look at the first example, it doesn't say anything what the person is trying to say. But on the second one, it clearly says that okay, this is the name of the person and this is a HR related profile. Because please remember, the recruiters will be working on multiple assignments. They don't work for only one job requirement and one to fill one position. They might be working for many, and they create folders and then they keep the resumes in each folder. So ensure that you name it so that it is easier for the recruiter to identify. And lastly, don't have any tables in your resume. I know it looks very appealing and all that stuff, but again, if the bot cannot read it, then you will just miss out on the opportunity. Don't have a cluttered resume. As I said, relevant information with specifics is enough. You don't have to write the entire history. Sometimes you might be worried that, okay, what if that piece of information is important and it is not mentioned in the job description? As I said, the person who wrote the job description is someone else. The person who is actually talking to you is somebody else. So they will always look at what the job description is. So the thumb rule is always try and match the job description. Let me share a quick story and let me see how much time we have. Okay, we have enough time. So this is a story that I came across in a book To Sell is Human. In US, you have this college, Tippy College of Business, and obviously they do the MBA courses for experienced people. So they get a lot of requests, the applications for the seat at the Tippy College of Business. In 2011, they said, okay, we get a lot of application. It becomes extremely difficult for us to actually navigate. What we will do is we'll put up a contest. And the contest says, please send in your application mentioning the qualities of future business leaders that you have. Okay. But it came with a very nice thing, which is it needs to be like a tweet. Now, I think some of you know Twitter, and the tweets used to be into 2011 140 characters. Now they have increased it. I think it's 280, but back then it was 140 characters only. So just imagine if you are the student or if you are somebody with an experience and want to study MBA in this college, but you have to send in your application in that 140 characters itself. The winning entry was from a guy who wrote this. He said, globally minded, innovative and driven, Tippy can sharpen. Forget about 140 characters, it is pretty less than that. And he has rhymed it as well, driven and sharpen. So this guy's application was selected, and not just selected, he got a seat, but also with scholarship. Yeah, nice story, isn't it? So I end the lecture in terms of the presentation by saying that you are not your resume. You are your work. Now, this applies for freshers as well. Don't think that what is mentioned in your resume is the thing about you, because the recruiters also understand, but just because of the nature of getting so many resumes, it needs to be filtered out. And how smart you are, how intelligent you are, sometimes shows up in the resume if you keep in mind the things that we have discussed. So I have again listed it here for easy reference, relevant information, easy to read, specific details, use keywords, match the requirement, and it needs to be evaluable. All right, so we have close to 25 minutes. Now I will go to some question and answer. Let's see how many questions we have received. Okay. All right. Ah, there is a question from Rashid Calicut. He says some of the companies mention the experience as 0 to 3, and as a fresher, if we send the resume for the same, then why would not we get a reply from them? All right. So, Rashid, as I said, just imagine if it is 0 to 3 years of experience, how many resumes the company might have received. Yeah. So if you follow the lecture that we just finished and try it next time, maybe the chances of you getting a response will go up. Okay. All right. Then there is a question from Vishwadatta from Vijayawada. Is one page resume good? So, as I touched upon it, yes, as long as you are smart enough in ensuring that you match the requirement and are able to finish it in one page, why not? But just in case if you are struggling, then make it 2 pages. And we also provide feedback sometimes to the candidate when we take an interview, because if it's, let's say, a walk-in, in a walk-in you don't submit your resume somewhere, you just walk in with your resume, and there the first information round itself, it will get scanned and screened, and then sometimes we provide feedback as well. Okay, then again, Manikandara Prabhu from Coimbatore is asking how many pages can resume contain for freshers. As I said, irrespective of freshers or an experienced person, maximum 2 is absolutely fine. And let me tell you that these days there are variety of resumes, because when I was talking to our recruitment team, they said they also get resumes in a form of a video these days. So I asked, oh, that's interesting. But they said most often that is for senior positions. Like if somebody is applying for a vice president role, then probably they'll just record a minute or 2 minute video and send it. And then people see that video so that they can see how well they are speaking, their body language, and a lot of other things will come out. All right. Ashutosh Sahu from Bhilai says, is it necessary to make a one-page resume? Okay, we just spoke about it. And second part of the question is, should I write a brief description about my projects and training in the resume, or just writing the title is enough? Very good question, Ashutosh. And I would say, please mention about your projects. Now, as I said, we also sometimes do mock interviews as a part of corporate social responsibility. So what we see is the candidate or the fresher has a lot, but unfortunately he or she has not mentioned it in the resume. So as I was showing you that you can mention about your projects in the way, that example that I gave you, because when you do a project you might have used something. There will be a title for that project, there will be a duration for that project, there will be the team members who are a part of that project, and what you have used and what skills you develop out of that project. You can list down all of it. And it's just not the project, but the internship that you have done, you can put it there as well, because I believe apart from your project, the internships gives you a lot more visibility and a lot more experience. Okay, then we have Shikha Seth from Gujarat. Can you please share the proper PDF of resume as an example so we can make our own as per that example? Okay, Shikha, so deliberately I have not shown any sample of resume on this lecture. I could have picked up any resume, but I thought I will just tell you what needs to go in that resume, but not show you, because I thought that probably some of you might think that, okay, that's the way resume needs to be done, and you will just take that template. And as I said, if you go on Google, you type resume templates, you get a lot of them. And organizations don't have a particular preference, but as long as the resume has relevant information, it's pretty easy to read and it matches to the job description, you are good. Okay, let me see what else we have. All right, somebody is asking, can you share the presentation that I have just shown here. So what I do is whoever has asked a question on that form, I try and respond. And once I'm through with that, I generally share the presentation. So as you have asked, you will get it. But it might take some time, so please have some patience. Okay. All right. So Dr. Karthikeyan from Madurai is asking, nowadays students make use of the templates available in the internet for resume preparation. Is it advisable since it has the right structure without any flexibility or creativity? So yes, Dr. Karthikeyan, as I said, you can take the template, but you need to bring in your own flavor to it. And as I said, if you allow somebody else to write your resume, then it is not going to come out well. Because at the end of the day, you might want to add something, but you will struggle because the positioning or the way that entire template has been created might not give you that flexibility. So I would say look at it, but build it from the scratch. All right. So there is an interesting question from Swatitha Road. She's saying, we usually say that a paper does not decide our knowledge. Then how can a resume decide our stuff? So, Swatitha, as I said, just because the mechanism in which the interviews and the screening and the evaluation, all of that happens, resume is your first. I think even in colleges, when you go, you have to do that application, right? And the example that I gave about the TP College of Business, there also they require application. So that is the first step. And as I said, definitely whatever you have mentioned will not decide everything about you. That is why we have the interview. But in order for you to reach that interview stage, you have to mention something which catches the attention of the interviewer. Okay. Okay. There is a question from Henry Charles Karaikudi. Do I need to change my resume every time when I apply for different company jobs? Yes, absolutely. That was my very important tip. Every job, a new resume. But again, let me also tell you, and I completely forgot, what you mentioned in your resume has to be correct information. Because when you mention that, the recruiter will feed that in a particular system. And in case if you get through the interview and they are ready to give you an offer, then based on what you have mentioned, they'll ask you to submit the documents. And once the documents are submitted, it is given to a background verification team, which does the background verification. And let me tell you, they do the job thoroughly. If you mention the name of the college, they will go to the college, whatever means they'll call, send an email, whatever, but they'll check with the college whether this person studied there and these are the marks they have received, whatever. There are a certain list of questions. Obviously, personal data, now we are getting that law, but I don't know how that will impact that. But the verification will happen. And there are cases that I have come across in my team. Somebody mentioned something, but they failed to submit the documents. And in spite of being in the company for 3 months, when their report came out red, we had to ask the person to leave the company. So every company follows this background verification. So please be careful in what you mention and mention only the accurate and right and true information about you. Okay. I'm just trying to pick only the relevant ones. All right. This is an interesting question. Logapriya from Theni, Tamil Nadu is asking, will hobby change our job position? Okay. So if I recall, I think the experienced people don't mention hobbies usually, but we see a lot of freshers and college students who are right out of college mention hobbies. There is no harm in mentioning hobby as long as it is not controversial. So but it is also not going to give you any additional point. But probably it allows an interviewer to ask you a question on that, just to see how well you articulate that hobby. I mean, if I give you an example, if somebody says watching TV is a hobby, in my opinion, that will not go down very well, because TV is an idiot box and a lot of trivia is there on it, and it kind of gives a subtle message that you waste a lot of time watching TV. So when you write your hobbies, maybe I would say change that into writing about your passion. If you're really passionate about something, write about it, and then you will have a story to tell the recruiter when you talk about that part of the segment. Okay. All right. Suraj from Kolkata says, explain job description. So, my friend, I have touched upon it in almost every slide, but for your benefit, I'll tell you it is a document which is written by the person who knows that we need people who can work according to that document. It will have the title, it will have the role, it will have the qualifications, it will have the responsibilities, it will have the skills, it will have the benefits or the results that needs to come out, it will have educational qualification. So most of the time it is 1 or 2 pages job description. All right. All right. So there is a question from Tamil Selvan from Salem. Is career objective may decide our resume, but I really don't know how to write. I can feel you, because when I was a student, I simply copy pasted what my friends wrote in terms of their objective. But as I said, your motivation, basically, your objective is nothing but your motivation to apply for that position. So let's say you are a fresher and you know that Capgemini as a company is coming to your campus for hiring. So you can mention about the company. In my first lecture, the title of the lecture was What Companies Expect While Hiring a Candidate. I said that please go to the website of the company and see what this company is into. Look at the About Us section, look at the services or the product, and probably talk to some of the people of that organization. And whatever impresses you about that organization, and you feel that you will be in a position to contribute towards that, you can write that as an objective. An objective is just a 1 or 2 lines maximum. But don't worry, even if you write and you fail, keep on writing, because one day you will get it. You know how nicely you will write a objective statement. And let me tell you, it is also not important. Okay, company is not gonna give you a lesser mark if there is no objective. It is just that it is universally accepted that that is one of the input for a resume. But even if you don't have one, in my opinion, it should be okay. All right. Mm, okay. So there is a question from Kuljinder Jalandhar says, for a person who has more than years of experience, is it very difficult to understand what are the things that are needed to add? So how to prioritize and give sequence? Very nice question. So what you need to do is again look at the keywords in the job description, because you're saying you have experience. So I assume when you have experience, you will apply for a job where there is a job description already in place, be it on LinkedIn or wherever. So you need to look at what are the keywords that are coming out, and you need to look at your own experience, your previous resumes that you have created, or the role responsibilities that you have done, and pick the key ones and just feed that in, so that when the ATS reads, it matches. Most of the keywords are there in your resume. You don't have to put down everything, only the ones which are there in the job description. So make your job description as the base. Start with that. All right. Okay, there is another question from Triveni. Can you share the PPT with us? Yes, I will. Okay, I am just skipping the questions which have been repeated. Okay. Gagandeep Kaur from Indore is asking, can you please tell us when we give educational qualifications in resume, so is it okay to tabulate them or to write in points? Okay, so I would still say maybe a table looks pretty neat, but again, if the ATS cannot read it properly, then you will just miss out. So you can space out properly and then just write the educational qualification, either the percentage or the CGPA. That would be my advice, Gagandeep. Hmm. Okay, so Karmakar from Chennai is asking, can the low marks in college or university compared to school and boards in which you have scored high affect your CVA? Okay, so I think I would say if you have good marks in your SSC, I mean your school and in your plus two and lower marks in your university, you can't put that first and then put your university marks below. It has to go as the recent first, as I said. And I think there will be a question to you if there is a decrease in the marks, then there will definitely be a question from the recruiter as to, can you please explain why your marks have gone down in university? Because they want to understand what has been your motivation and whether it is to do with your not working hard or what are some of the things, because all of us have different situations in our life, right? Okay, all right. There's a question from Shiva Chennai, says what is the difference between CV and resume for experienced person which should be used while applying for a job? Okay, so Shiva, resume or CV, it's pretty much the same stuff. Companies won't give a better mark for somebody who writes resume with those two extra accents, or if somebody says just CV and doesn't even elaborate it to a curriculum vitae, it's absolutely fine. You can write resume or CV, doesn't matter. All right. Okay, so Mr. Bala Subramaniam from Tirupati is asking resume formats for faculty members. So I wish I can reflect on that, but I seriously have not seen a faculty member's resume. I only have experience of seeing IT related resume, so I'm sorry I won't be able to reflect on that. Maybe one day when I become a lecturer, maybe I can reflect on it. Okay. Um, Oh, this is a very interesting question from Nikita Kokare from Kolhapur. She's asking how is the resume format gets changed according to occupations. Very nice, and thanks for bringing that up, Nikita, because as I said, each industry is different. So let's say if you're going for a job which is creative in nature, then probably they expect your resume to come out creatively. And a lot of creative jobs don't have this ATS system in place. Let me tell you, these ATS application tracking systems apply only where the supply is more and the demand is less. But for creative sites, for an example, let's say you're applying for a columnist in a newspaper company, there might not be a lot of people who will go for it. So you can play around with your resume or a curriculum vitae, and you can be as creative as you can. I'm sure those industries appreciate not a normal looking resume, but something different. So yes, like how you have, like the tip I said, different resumes for different positions, different resumes for different industries. Thanks for bringing that out. I think that's a very important point. We have 4 more minutes. Let me see if I can uh, answer a couple of more. Okay, Manjula Arora from Mumbai is asking how to get through ATS. So, what you are primarily asking is how to beat that ATS. Well, as I said, as long as you take care of the things that I have mentioned, because ATS is not gonna throw out a resume even in spite of having all the check marks. The keywords are there, the format is right, the font is proper, it is able to evaluate. You will still come under that threshold of people. Maybe in the the first 10th quartile or whatever, and then that will be sent to the person who is raising that request, and chances are that you will be called for an interview. So just take care of that, and you will get a score with rank within that threshold. Okay, so here Samruddha from Dombivali is asking, is it also necessary that freshers who don't get their first job should also make a different resume? Yes, why not? Because if you are applying for Capgemini and Capgemini's expectations are different, but just in case you don't want to go for an IT company, sometimes you find something else and that might be very closer to what your purpose is, passion is, or what you want to pursue, then you can't be using the same resume there. You have to see what exactly they are looking for and create a resume according to that. Now when I say create resume, a new resume, I don't mean that you have to completely change the whole. It's just that some parts, you can't be changing your name, your phone number, your email ID, and your educational qualification. All you will play around with the objective, and probably if you have experience, and try and match it to that requirement. All right. Hmm. So Palak from Delhi is asking, I don't have any work experience, so how to make my resume still stand out than others? So Palak, as I said, even if you don't have experience, you might have done some project. If not in the college, you might have done some personal projects. You can put that there. If you have done internship, I am assuming when you say work experience, I don't know if any internship was there even for 1 or 2 months, that you can put, or any summer jobs that you have done, you can put that. If you don't have anything, it's absolutely fine. You can just, because companies also know that you might not have, you don't have any experience, so you can only put certain key information, and your resume might look just like a one pager. Okay. Right. All right. There are some repetitions. I'm skipping that. Okay. Again, Rahim Khan from Hyderabad is asking what is the difference between resume and CV. I have answered that. Okay. So we are right on time, and I thank you very much for listening patiently for the last 1 hour. As I said in my first lecture, it is extremely difficult to pay attention when you are not taking part by responding or asking questions live. So it takes a lot, and I am extremely happy that NPTEL gave me this opportunity. And like last time, I'll try and respond to all relevant questions. And whoever has asked a question, I'll share the PPT. And if NPTEL gives another opportunity, then you will see me once again. Thank you so much.